What's up? What's up? What's up? So, my name is Alexis Terry, and I am the founder and lead consultant with Twisted Teaching Educational Consulting Company. I am an instructional success consultant, and I am a certified wellness coach focusing on building the capacity of teachers and educators who work in urban spaces to reach and teach all students without compromising their well being or losing themselves in the process. So, I am so excited to be back here on my YouTube channel. And what I want to talk to you guys today is about being real in your classroom. Yes, being real educators with real lives, making real impact, having real transformation, and showing up for your students in a real kind of way. Because I firmly believe that when educators show up in academic spaces as their real selves, we create classroom environments where students feel free to show up as their real self. So, we're going to talk about what it means to be a real educator today. So, let's jump into it. So, if you've been following me for some time now, you'll know that back in 2019, 2020, I published my book, Real Love Strategies for Reaching Students When They See No Way Out. And what Real Love stands for is classrooms where we have students that are with relationships rooted in respect for our students, the families, communities, and cultures. We're engaging our students in a culturally responsive, culturally relevant, and realistic manner. So, we're bringing in the research of Geneva Gay, Gloria Latson Billings, Zaretta Hammond. We're bringing in some Dr. Emden there just to engage our students in a manner that is authentic to them and that they can show up and feel like they are a value add and that they are an asset to our classrooms and to our schools and to our learning environments. When we have real classrooms, we create spaces where students show up as their authentic selves. And then we create these learning environments that speak to the holistic and individual needs of all of our students. We are loyal to our students. We help our students overcome obstacles. We create a vision for our students when our students can't vision for themselves. And then we educate students for a future that they can't currently see. So when Real Love was published back in 2019, 2020, as we all know, a multitude of things happened in our nation and happened throughout the world. One of the biggest things was the pandemic. And what I quickly realized when I am going through to schools is talking to teachers and educators about cultivating and sustaining classrooms rooted in real love, which is rooted in the theory of being culturally relevant and culturally responsive in our classrooms, is that educators struggled with this concept of cultivating and sustaining classrooms where they felt like they were reaching and teaching all students and that this real love was present, because the real love that I was asking and challenging and pushing educators to be able to show up in their classrooms and show to their students, they were struggling to show that real love to themselves. The one thing that we didn't realize coming out of the pandemic is that we got so focused on how the pandemic impacted our students that we didn't really think about how the pandemic impacted the people that we are putting in front of our students. We didn't think about how the pandemic stripped away from educators and teachers the core of their being, right? We didn't think about how dehumanizing living through a global pandemic was for our educators, teaching in a virtual space for our educators. And so I felt like when I'm going into schools and I'm going into classrooms and I'm talking about, I need you to be real with students. I need you to show students love. I'm looking at uh, beings who didn't know what it was like to be real with themselves, who didn't know what it felt like to fully and truly and authentically love themselves. And then when you exist in a Black and brown body, you exist in a body from a marginalized community, you exist in a body from the LGBTQ plus community, you were struggling to go into a space that's asking you to be real with your students and love your students, because in this space, our education space, you couldn't be your real self, right? You were in this space, and this education space did not love you, but here I was asking you to love this space back, asking you to go be real in a space and be real with students when you couldn't even show up in that space as your real self. Pause. And I had to step back and I had to go back and think about, if I want educators to show up in classrooms as their real, authentic selves so they can create these real spaces for students to show up, these loving spaces for students to feel welcome and included and seen and valued and heard. What is it that educators need to do what I'm asking them to do what students need them to do what society wants them to do? What I discovered is that educators need the same thing that our students need. They need people to be real with them. They need spaces that allow them to show up as their real self. They need love. They need this profession to love them. They need their administrators to love them. They need their communities to love them. They need society to love them. But most importantly, they needed space and opportunity for them to genuinely and truly love on themselves and find out what it meant and still means to have a genuine love for oneself. So I had to bring it back to the bottom of the map. Would no, that's the Louisiana in me. But what I thought about was what educators really, really need is they need real love too. But it's the same kind of real love that our students need, but like, let's take it to a deeper level, right? So when we're asking educators to cultivate and sustain these relationships for their students, their families, and communities that are rooted in respect, we have to push educators to first examine what is the relationship that they have with themselves. What is the relationship that they have with their physical and their wider communities? What is the relationship that they have with their family, their loved ones? What is the relationship that they have with the people in their building? And so the first thing I thought about was, how do I develop capacity and the skills in educators that I work with to care for the deep relationships that they have with their physical, their mental, their emotional, their cultural, and spiritual beings that they are. If we want to engage students in a culturally relevant and culturally responsive and realistic manner, right, then how are we creating opportunity and space for educators to engage with the deep cultural aspects of themselves, right? How are we creating and cultivating this space for educators to really get in tune with who they are and what makes them who they are at the deep level, not at the surface level, but at that deep level? How are we giving educators the space to unpack and sit and heal and connect and explore who they are and engage with who they are at the deep cultural level in our educational spaces? If we want educators to create these spaces where students show up as their authentic self, how can we create spaces where educators can show up as their full authentic self, right? And if we want educators to cultivate these learning environments that speak to the individual needs of students, how can we cultivate and sustain these learning environments that speak to the individual needs that our educators have for themselves? This kind of took me down this pivot with twisted teaching. Yes, we're still twisting and teaching the way learning happens in schools and in communities, right? But instead of just focusing on how do we meet the social, emotional, cultural, and academic needs of our students, I want to bring into this work, how do we meet the social, emotional, cultural needs that our educators have, so that that way they have the capacity to do all the things that we are asking them to do for our students. And not only do they have the capacity to do what it is that we're asking them to do for our students, they have the capacity to do it from a place of fullness. They have the capacity to do it from a place of joy. They have the capacity to do it from a place of healing. They have the capacity to do it from a place of love and authenticity. They have a place where they can create these spaces that are transforming students' lives because their lives are being transformed in the process. So that's what Twisted Teaching is all about. And if you follow me on Instagram at Life After Lessons with Lex, that's what Life After Lessons is all about, is that how do we, yes, twist the way teaching and learning happens in schools, but how do we help educators live full and meaningful and fulfilled lives after the lessons are done? Because it's what's happening in between teaching and not teaching that sometimes really shows up to our into our classrooms and our schools, and it shapes the experiences and interactions that our students have in classrooms and schools. So how did I get here? How did I get to this journey where realizing wellness was at the core of instruction in the classroom and transforming instruction in the classroom and liberating students' lives and deeply and meaningfully impacting students' lives through the learning experiences and opportunities that we provide? So I got here through my own story. So I love to tell a story. Back in 2019, my Uncle Benny, I was raised by my Uncle Benny. If you read my book, Any, I was born in to two parents who were both drug addicts. And based off of my parents' drug addiction, I was raised by my grandmother and my Uncle Benny. In 2015, I lost my grandmother. And in 2018, 2019, stage 4 lung cancer, I lost my Uncle Benny 27 days after he had a confirmed diagnosis of stage 4 lung cancer. And right after the diagnosis, I went back into the classroom. Day before my Uncle Benny's funeral, my daughter fell off the couch and she fractured her femur. And I sat with my daughter and cared for my daughter in a spica cast for 6 long weeks, right? While grieving the loss of someone so near and dear to me. And guess what I did? I went right back into the classroom after that. I was pregnant in 2019, pregnant with baby number 4. And so after experiencing loss, after going through a very, very traumatic experience with my daughter at a very young age, 10 months, fracturing her femur, being pregnant with baby number 4, I went back into the classroom. And I kept pushing and pushing and pushing and trucking on, thinking, oh, I'm good. Everything's fine. I'm going to show up and teach. But guess who was feeling that I wasn't fine? It was my students. It was my students who I was preaching and writing at this time about the power of showing students real love, but they weren't experiencing truly the real love that I was capable of showing them because I was in a place where I wasn't showing myself real love by continuing to suppress all the things that were deep down on the inside of me that I did not want to deal with. And so when I started going into classrooms and schools and working with teachers and talking about the power of real love in the classroom and how it can transform students' lives like it transformed my life, I was looking at teachers who looked like me back in 2018, 2019. I was looking at teachers who had so many other things going on in their personal life that right now I'm struggling professionally and nobody even knows it. My kids know it because they get to see me behind the closed doors. They get to see the deep sighs. They get to see me trying to keep myself together. They get to see me frustrated and irritated. They know it, but no one else knew it. And I really didn't have the space to really stop and say, not even a space. I didn't have the space nor the tools to really stop and say, Alexis, what is it that you need to care for you so that way you can care for other people? And so my own personal experiences mixed with the professional experiences that I've had working with teachers as a consultant through the lens of equity-based practices. As I've had the experiences working with schools, as I've had the experiences working with teachers as a wellness coach, I noticed that real love is needed. Real love is needed in the classroom, but it's not just about real love for our students. It's about real love for ourselves as educators, because when we show ourselves real love as educators, we're able to show our students the real love that they need to set their minds and their hearts free. So that's what you'll start to see on this channel here, is you'll start to see that how do we develop our capacity and our skills and our tool belt with wellness practices and instructional practices that we can bring into our classrooms, where the needs that everybody in the classroom has, from student to teacher, everybody needs are being met. We are creating classrooms that are whole. We are creating classrooms that are happy. We are creating classrooms that are healthy. We are creating classrooms that are healed, because we need good teachers in the classroom. Our students need good teachers in the classroom. And right now, some of the things that we're seeing that are pushing teachers out of the profession, it's not about what parents are doing at home. It's not about the shifting, changing culture of our society. It's really about what's going on in here and how is it manifesting itself out into the world and out into the spaces that we exist. And so if we build our capacity and we deal with the things that are going on in here, no, it won't take some of the stressors away, but it'll help to minimize and reduce the way we respond to the stressors, right? And see, here's the thing that we have to understand, because I get a lot of people to talk about, well, Alexis, like, what does wellness have to do with like being culturally responsive, right? Being culturally responsive is responding to the deep cultural needs that students have. We are cultural beings, right? But we can't be culturally responsive with students if we're not even culturally responsive to ourselves. We are cultural beings. We go into space with deep cultural needs. And sometimes these spaces force us to suppress those deep cultural needs, act as if they don't exist, so that we can assimilate into the status quo or into the culture of the society of the campus. And those deep cultural needs are being neglected. And so what's festering on the inside of us, what's boiling on the inside of us, is something that will soon to spill out. So we can't be culturally responsive with students if we're not being culturally responsive with ourselves. We can't meet the social emotional needs of our students if we're not meeting the social emotional needs of ourselves. And please, don't get me started on the expectation for us to serve as mental health professionals or in a capacity of mental health professionals, or even deal with mental health related issues when we don't have the capacity to deal with these issues that arise in our own lives. And so this is what this space is about. This is the transition and the shift that you'll see here on the Twisted Teaching channel. What you're going to see here weekly are wellness strategies and wellness tips that you can come and apply right now to meet your deep social, emotional, and cultural needs. What you'll find here is instructional strategies and instructional tips, like the ones that are on this channel, to meet the deep rooted social, emotional, cultural, and academic needs for your students, right? Because academic achievement can only happen when you are achieving and feeling like you are achieving and meeting some of those deep needs that you have as the human being that you are. So I welcome you to the Twisted Teaching channel. Bring your friends, tell your friends to get with my friends, so baby, we can be friends, because here it's going to get real. Here we're going to have relationships rooted in respect for our students, their families, their communities, and their cultures. But we're also going to have relationships that focus on the deep. We're also going to improve the relationships that are important to us, right? Our relationship with our money, our relationship with our time, our relationship with our family, our relationship with God, our relationship with our career, our dreams, and our aspirations, because those things matter to us still as educators. When we're engaging our students in a culturally relevant and realistic manner, we are going to engage with the deep cultural parts of us in a real kind of way. We want students to show up as their authentic selves, baby. We are showing up as our authentic self in spaces as well. And with the learning environment that is speaking to the holistic needs of students, you have to exist in that learning environment too. So I want that learning environment to speak to you. So how do we cultivate and sustain these spaces, these real spaces where everybody Everybody is seen, valued, heard, and empowered to do and be the great being that God has created them to be. So I welcome you here to the Twisted Teaching channel. Click subscribe, turn on the notification button, because every week I'm ready to drop to you a real resource, a real strategy that is going to improve your wellness in your instruction in a real kind of way. All right. Check you out next week. See you on Twisted Teaching channel. Bye-bye.